Recording in. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about physiology of the heart. I'm going to explain what happens when the heart contracts and when it relaxes and what is the structure of the heart and also about the valves. Okay, so let's begin. All right, so let me choose a color. Yeah. So here, these are my handwritten notes and I'll be sharing it with you. If you're interested, you can download it. So let's start. So we all know that basically heart is having atrium, two ventricles. Here you can see left atrium, here you can see left ventricle, here you can see right atrium and right ventricle. Okay, right side pumps deoxygenated blood. All right, so right atrium receives blood that is deoxygenated, whereas left side receives oxygenated blood. All right. Now, there is a muscular wall between this atrium and ventricle. Okay, that is called as interventricular septum. So this is left atrium, left ventricle, and the side wall of the left ventricle is thick as compared to the right side. I did not draw it thin, but this is actually thinner as compared to the left side. Okay, next. We have interventricular septum, which is the strong muscular wall. All right, so why am I specifying this again and again is when there is any problem with the heart, there might be a condition where, the muscle might be affected. This might be the collagen might come and deposit on it, which will lead to heart attack. So just remember the parts for now: left atrium, left ventricle, right atrium, right ventricle. Then we have strong muscular wall, okay, which is nothing but interventricular septum that is present between both the ventricles. Okay, next we have, below I have written, like I've told you that left side is really important because it is pumping oxygenated blood. Okay, now how does the oxygenated blood enter the heart? So from here it enters the heart. These are the pulmonary veins. So pulmonary veins brings oxygenated blood from the lungs. Okay, let me tell you something. We have always studied that arteries carry pure blood, that is oxygenated blood, and veins carry impure blood, that is deoxygenated blood. But there is an exception to this, that is pulmonary vein carries oxygenated blood, whereas pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated blood. Okay. So here, pulmonary veins, they bring the oxygenated blood. So the purified blood, oxygenated blood comes from the lungs to the heart. Okay. And from all over the body, the blood enters in the right side. Okay. Now, so deoxygenated blood enters from the pulmonary artery and oxygenated blood enters from the pulmonary vein. Okay, so pulmonary, you're getting the oxygenated blood from the lungs to the left side of the heart, and deoxygenated blood from right side. Okay, so I hope we are clear till here. So I've explained you again. I'm just giving a quick review. This is left atrium, left ventricle, right atrium, right ventricle. We have interventricular septum. Remember, left side is thick as compared to the right side. Okay, then we have valves. So here between atrium and ventricle, we have AV valves, atrioventricular valves. Okay, so I told you that, for example, this is left atrium, left ventricle, right atrium, right ventricle. Here you have valves, like the openings, like for example, okay. Now, blood has entered, I told you, from pulmonary vein to the left atrium, right? Now from left atrium to left ventricle, there is a door. That door needs to open so that the blood will flow from left atrium to left ventricle. Okay, now that door is nothing but an AV valve. Okay, so this is one AV valve, and we have similarly in between the right atrium and the right ventricle. So this left atrium and left ventricle, the valve that is present between them is called bicuspid valve. or mitral valve. Okay. Then on the right side, we have tricuspid valve. Now, tricuspid means three cusp, bicuspid means two cusp. But how do you remember? How do you remember that tricuspid valve is on right side? An easy way to remember is tri. It has R, so I remember it as right. And of course, bi does not have L, so I remember it as left AV valve. So we are clear on the valves, we are clear on the parts. So let's go move ahead. Okay, so in the physiology part, what are we going to study is first what happens when the blood enters. I told you pulmonary vein is carrying oxygenated blood from the lungs, pulmonary artery is carrying deoxygenated blood from the lungs, and this side deoxygenated blood has entered the right atrium, and this side the oxygenated blood has entered the left atrium. Okay, now what happens? The AV valve will open and then the ventricle get filled with the blood. Then after a point when there is a contraction and relaxation of the heart, right? We know that heart is always having this kind of a movement. So when heart contracts, the blood will go out. The blood is ejected out, okay? That is called as ventricular systole. So we'll be studying about this right now. So in ventricular filling, what will happen? Like I told you, now you have received blood here and here. Here you have received deoxygenated blood, and here you have received oxygenated blood. Right? Now, this is left atrium, left ventricle, right atrium, right ventricle. I have told you that this is tricuspid valve, this is bicuspid valve. Okay. Now, in the ventricular filling, these valves open up. Okay. And the blood will reach the ventricles. Now there is another kind of a valve that is called as semilunar valves. Now what are these semilunar valves? Let me explain you. So I have already told you about tricuspid bicuspid valve. That is the same thing over here. And semilunar valves, there are two kinds. One is aortic semilunar valve, which you can see here from left ventricle to aorta. Okay, and pulmonary semilunar valve is present from right ventricle to pulmonary trunk. Okay, what is the function of these valves is, see, I have told you that the blood flow like this is happening because of AV valve. Now, this is during the filling phase. Now, when the heart contracts, the blood will go out. Okay, that time, in order for the backward flow not to happen, in order to prevent the backward flow of the blood, these valves are important. Okay, so semilunar valves, always remember, they help in prevention of backward flow of the blood, and they are of two types. One is aortic semilunar valve and pulmonary semilunar valve. Okay, now here, so during the first phase over here, ventricular filling, what happens? So now ventricular fillings, what will happen? The AV valves will open. AV valves will open up, whereas semilunar valves will remain closed. Remember, AV valves open whenever there is pressure is low. Okay, and semilunar valves open opposite. When pressure is high, semilunar valves are open. So right now, semilunar valves are closed when there is ventricular filling. So when ventricular filling is done, what happens? The blood will flow from left atrium to left ventricle and right atrium to right ventricle. Okay, so here, I hope you have understood why AV valves are open, because pressure is low, and semilunar valves are closed. Now next, we have ventricular systole. Now what happens during ventricular systole? Ventricular systole means the contraction. Systole means contraction, diastole means relaxation. Okay, so here the blood is pumped out. Now what do I mean by that is, now we have here the blood remaining, right? The blood has already flown from right atrium to right ventricle and left atrium to left ventricle. So what is meant by the remaining blood that is present? Okay, that is what we need to study. Okay, that is end diastolic volume. Okay, and what happens when the heart contracts? So here we had blood from here, from the first diagram that we saw. Now this blood, what will happen whenever, okay, whenever heart contracts, the blood will be ejected. Now it will go from the ventricles through aorta and the pulmonary trunk. Now here, what happens? The pressure is really high. Then the semilunar valves are open and AV valves remain closed. Okay, so here you can see blood pumped out is called a stroke volume. This I'll explain you what it is. Now, this is end systolic volume. So what is end systolic volume means? Now, what did I tell you? The blood from here, left ventricle to aorta, and this is to pulmonary trunk. Now, the basics we have already studied in previous classes, and if you have missed, I will link it in the description below. This is more like a revision. Okay, so here what is happening in the first step, the blood is flowing from right atrium to right ventricle, left atrium to left ventricle, right? Pressure is low, so the blood AV valves open and the blood is now accumulated. That is end diastolic volume. Okay, next we have ventricular systole. When heart contracts, the pressure is more, so semilunar valves open up. So the blood flows from left ventricle to aorta and blood flows from right ventricle to pulmonary trunk. Okay, now semilunar valves are open. Now, so here I'm saying the blood is flowing. Now, just in one contraction, all the blood won't flow. Like for example, here if 120 ml blood was there as an end diastolic volume, here from the 120 ml, whole thing would not go. Okay, so here only like suppose think 50 ml is gone. So the volume of blood that has passed through the semilunar valves is 50 ml. Okay, are you able to understand? Okay, so that is the volume of the blood that has passed through the semilunar valves. Now, what is end systolic volume is the remaining blood that is present after ejection. What is end systolic volume? That is nothing but the remaining blood present after ejection is called as end systolic volume. Okay, now so blood is pumped out, and next we have what are the valves are closed and open. Now let us study here. End diastolic volume was 120 ml, end systolic volume was 50 ml. So what is end stroke volume? Stroke volume is nothing but, like I told you, first the remaining blood was 120 ml and the blood that is ejected through the semilunar valves was 50 ml. Now, this is end systolic volume. This is end diastolic volume. Stroke volume is after the blood that is being ejected out, whatever blood is remaining is called as stroke volume. Now, let's see this picture. Here I told you 120 ml is there. Here I told you some amount of blood is being ejected. Some amount of blood is being ejected. Okay, so 50 ml of blood is ejected. So that is end systolic volume. Now, how much amount of blood is remaining is called as stroke volume. That is nothing but end diastolic volume minus end systolic volume, that is 70 ml. Okay. Now, what is ejection fraction? What is ejection fraction is stroke volume by end stroke volume. Now, what is this exactly is? It is the fraction of how much blood has been ejected out from left ventricle to aorta through the, which valves are open over here? The semilunar valves are open. Okay, and left ventricle to the pulmonary trunk. So what happens is, when the heart is relaxed, the blood came in. When heart is contracting, the blood is going out. But what happens in certain patients is when they're exercising or like suddenly, all of a sudden, if they get a heart attack, the blood filling is normal. That is the diastolic volume. End diastolic volume is 120 ml. But end systolic volume, which is 50 ml, if it doesn't happen, it means the patient will directly have a heart attack. How much volume is coming and how much volume is pumping out should be in proportion. If there is any differences in the quantity received and then the quantity being sent back, it means there might be a problem. Also, I told you that the interventricular septum is muscular. Now, if there is any problem in this muscle and it is being filled with collagen, that also can indicate a heart disease or a myocardial infarction. Okay, now ejection fraction for the given example is, so here it is end stroke volume by end diastolic volume. That is 70 by 120, approximately 58% is normal. Like I told you, now just so that you remember, let me tell you again, explain it very easily. So first I'm telling you ventricular filling is there. What happens now? Imagine this is heart and these are the valves. Valves open, blood flows from left atrium to left ventricle, right atrium to right ventricle. Left side of the heart receives oxygenated blood. Right side of the heart receives deoxygenated blood. So the blood is coming from the right atrium to right ventricle, left atrium to left ventricle. How? The AV valves open up. Okay. Now, whatever the amount of blood that is being held in both these ventricles is called as end diastolic volume. Okay. Now, during heart contraction is when you hear the sound lump. And what happens then is now this volume which is there, whole thing is not pumped. Okay. Little bit will be remaining in one contraction. So the amount of the blood that is going to be pumped from left ventricle to aorta and right ventricle through the pulmonary trunk, what happens is that blood is not exactly how much was remaining is not pumped. Little bit is being pumped. Okay, that is called end systolic volume. And the amount of blood that remains back is called as stroke volume. Okay, now remember something. AV valves are closed over here, but in case little amount of blood flows back, that means there is a problem in these valves. That's when a heart murmur can be heard. Okay, now we are clear about the end diastolic volume and systolic volume, and the amount of the blood remaining is stroke volume. Now, stroke volume by end diastolic volume is ejection fraction. Okay, so how much blood heart is receiving? Approximately it should be able to push that much out. If it is not happening, it might indicate a heart disease. And also the muscular protective layer of the heart is very important, because if any damage to that can also lead to a heart attack. Okay, so end diastolic volume and preload in clinical setting are almost used as interchangeable words. They are pretty much considered same. Preload is nothing but actually amount of pressure that is pushing on the ventricles, the pressure that is pushing on the ventricles. Now, suppose if a person is suffering from a heart attack, this person is suffering from a heart attack. The compliance, the stretchy myocyte, means I told you, the heart is covered by a muscle, right? And the interventricular septum is also muscular. Now, if there's any damage done to that and it is deposited by collagen, that is when the person might go into a heart attack. Okay. And dilated cardiomyopathy, that is heart is enlarged than the normal. Okay. Now, how much blood enters the heart determines how much blood it should be ejected. So how much blood will come? I told you that much will be ejected. And this was two scientists have given the law that is called as Frank-Sterling law of heart. That is, if end diastolic volume is more, stroke volume also will be more. Okay, next we come to isovolumetric relaxation. Here, all the valves are closed. AV valve as well as semilunar valves. Okay, the pressure is still too high for the AV valves to open, but it is too low to keep the semilunar valves open. Okay, so both the valves are closed over here. So I hope we are clear. This diagram particularly is very important. I'll give you a quick recap. So we already learned about the physiology. We know left atrium, left ventricle, right atrium, right ventricle. We have AV valves, and again we have semilunar valves. Now left side receives oxygenated blood, right side receives deoxygenated blood. Now atrium, the blood will enter from these, and then when it enters the ventricle, the AV valves open up and the blood enters the ventricle. So amount of blood received and is present in the ventricles is called as end diastolic volume. And after, when heart contracts, the blood gets pushed out. Okay, and the semilunar valves are open. This is called as end systolic volume. And whole blood, if 120 ml of blood was there in the heart, that whole thing is not pushed out. Little bit is pushed out, little bit is remaining. So the remaining blood is called as stroke volume. And if there is any problem with the amount of the blood that is being ejected, or there is any damage done to the muscle, then, or if there is deposition of collagen, then it can be an indication for a heart disease. Okay, and during ventricular systole, always AV valves are closed in case there is a backward flow of blood that is observed in the patients, then it means that there is a heart murmur, which is a abnormality. So that is all for today. I hope you have understood today's class, and a little bit about blood vessels, arteries, capillaries, veins. We already know a lot about it, so I'm discussing this at the end. Arteries carry pure blood. There is exceptions for the arteries and veins. Please leave in the description below. Please leave in the comments below. I'll leave the answer in the description, but just I want you to try and answer me what are those exceptions. And arteries have strong muscle. They are always at high pressure, and then as they move away from the heart, the pressure decreases. Okay, it is usually at 120 mmHg near the heart. Now arterioles are nothing but little arteries, and they help in the blood flow. Capillaries, they're tiniest blood vessels, and they are designed for exchange, and they carry deoxygenated blood away. And there's no muscle. The capillaries is around, the pressure is 35 mmHg. It can go even to 10 mmHg also. Veins, they are large, they are thin-walled and low pressure veins that carry blood back to the heart. So, and I already discussed about valves. So that is all for today. I hope you have understood today's class. And in case if you have any questions, you can always leave your questions in the comments below. And if you have really understood today's topic and you have enjoyed my video, please do leave a like, share, and subscribe to my channel, and stay tuned to my channel for more videos. Thanks for watching.